It is midnight in Washington, 5 in London, and 2 on a Friday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gun-young. Here are the top stories making headlines at this hour. Korea's top telecom authority slaps the country's 3 mobile carriers with 45-day business suspensions for providing illegal subsidies. This in defiance of repeated government warnings. South Korea calls on North Korea to accept its latest proposal for Red Cross talks on resuming reunions for families separated by the Korean War. We'll have the latest. And Japan will face further isolation from the international community if it keeps ignoring the grievous issues of its wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. That's according to Seoul's foreign minister upon arrival from UN meeting in Geneva. We'll have those stories and more, but first, let us begin right here in this country. Korea's 3 mobile carriers will undergo a 45-day business suspension starting next week as punishment for defying government warnings and providing illegal subsidies. Seoul's Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning said Friday that the mobile carriers will be banned from taking new subscriptions between March 13th and May 18th. Now, during that period, 2 carriers will be suspended at the same time in rotation with a third. Users will also be banned from changing their mobile device unless it has been damaged, lost, or used for over 2 years. The ministry warned that it will take stronger measures if the carriers do not comply. Korea has 3 mobile carriers: SK Telecom, KT, and LG Uplus. Now to the patent battle that refuses to go away. It's good news for Samsung this time, as Apple's request for a permanent U.S. ban on Samsung's patent-infringing products has been denied. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
A U.S. court has rejected Apple's request for a permanent sales ban on Samsung products. In a ruling Thursday, U.S. District Judge Lucy Koh said Apple had not presented enough evidence to show its patented features were a significant enough driver of consumer demand to warrant an injunction. Judge Koh wrote that numerous features, such as battery life, MP3 player functionality, operating system, text messaging options, GPS, and processor speed, were not tested by Apple for the purpose of litigation to see whether they are highly important to U.S. consumers. Apple had earlier stated that around 23 models of Samsung's older smartphones and tablets, including the Galaxy S4G and the Galaxy Tab 10.1, infringe upon its patents. This ruling comes ahead of another patent trial set to begin later this month, involving newer Samsung phones, and could negatively affect any further attempts by Apple to block the sales of those models as well. In a statement, Samsung said it was pleased with the ruling. Apple has yet to comment. Samsung and Apple have been locked in legal battles over patents across the globe for nearly 3 years. In a separate case in 2012, Apple was awarded more than $900 million by a U.S. court over Samsung, which earned $7.7 billion last quarter. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
South Korea has reiterated its call on North Korea to accept its proposal for Red Cross talks on resuming reunions for families separated by the Korean War. Now, Seoul's Unification Ministry said Friday it sent a message to Pyongyang saying that humanitarian issues such as family reunions have always been dealt with by the Red Cross. It noted the North had agreed at their previous meeting to hold further rounds of Red Cross talks to discuss such issues. Pyongyang rejected the proposal for talks on Wednesday, saying the proper atmosphere had not been created. Seoul says the issue of family reunions should not be linked to political or military tensions. Meanwhile, the United Nations has extended a mandate for sanctions on North Korea, saying the regime remains a serious concern to international community or insecurity. Now, this in response to a request from South Korea and the U.S. to take action against North Korea for the missiles it has fired off over the past 2 weeks. Ji Myung-gil has more.
The UN Security Council on Thursday extended a mandate for sanctions on North Korea for another 13 months, until April 2015, after South Korea and the United States denounced North Korea for firing off 2 rounds of ballistic missiles in the last 2 weeks, calling it a clear and calculated sanctions violation. Through a report, they argued the UN Sanctions Committee to examine the Scud missile launches and take appropriate action in response to the violations of multiple Security Council resolutions. Pyongyang launched 2 Scud short-range ballistic missiles from its southeastern coast on February 27th and 2 more Scud missiles from the same coast on March 3rd. North Korea routinely test-fires short-range missiles, and experts say the recent launches are not expected to raise tensions in the region. The UN Security Council slapped tough sanctions on Pyongyang in response to nuclear tests in 2006 and 2009. Additional UN resolutions require the North to abandon all of its ballistic missile programs. Ballistic missiles can be used to launch nuclear weapons, and additional UN resolutions also demand that North Korea stop its nuclear tests and abandon all of its nuclear weapons programs. 심영길, 아리랑 뉴스.
South Korea's defense reform for this year includes preemptive contingency plans to suppress North Korea. No, this strategy includes both military and non-military measures. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin reports.
What is eye-catching about this year's defense reform is that it includes plans to allow South Korea to preemptively strike North Korea if Pyongyang is about to attack. Previously, Seoul's response was limited to local provocations. But the preemptive strike capability adds a whole new strategic level in dealing with Pyongyang's provocations. This includes striking North Korea's missile and nuclear facilities in the early stages, using the so-called kill chain system. Under international law, a country that conducts a preemptive strike could be blamed for starting the war. With that in mind, South Korea's defense ministry says the preemptive strike concept used here will be seen as collective self-defense under international standards. Pyongyang is expected to react strongly to the new reform. But the ministry emphasized that it's to reduce damage and prevent Pyongyang from taking additional provocative measures.
Our main focus is to simultaneously prepare for North's asymmetric power, local and all-out war scenarios.
In addition, the military plans to merge 2 of its 3 army headquarters and set up a ground operations command. The new command will have more air support from the newly enhanced Air Force Air Support Operations Center. And the Army Corps commander will have the authority to call in an airstrike.
The Corps commander's commanding system was simplified with computer networking systems, and we are able to fight off our enemy in real time.
The military plans to deploy unmanned aerial vehicles, state-of-the-art multiple rocket launchers, and other high-tech gadgetry to maximize South Korea's defense capability on the border. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Gon-yong, live from Seoul.
Korea's efforts to pressure Japan to take responsibility for its past wrongdoings may be paying dividends. Japan has denied that it has plans to make changes to its official apology to the Korean victims of wartime sexual slavery. It is, however, sticking to its stance that the victims were compensated under a bilateral treaty signed in 1965. Connie Kim reports.
Japan's ambassador to the UN in Geneva, Takashi Okada, said Tokyo, contrary to earlier suggestions, has never spoken of reviewing the 1993 Kono Statement, in which then Chief Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono apologized to the victims of Japan's sex slavery.
Since then, the position of the government of Japan has not changed at all. The government of Japan has never spoken of reviewing the Kono Statement.
Back in Geneva, Okada said the Japanese government had fully compensated the victims through a 1965 treaty that normalized Korea's economic and diplomatic relations after its liberation from Japan. Late last month, Suga said Tokyo would re-examine the testimony given by former sex slaves, as the government at the time did not verify the victims' remarks. Following Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se's remarks on Wednesday, Yoo Yeon-chul, deputy chief of South Korea UN mission, urged Japan to admit to and take responsibility for its military's past use of sex slaves.
The political leaders and government officials of Japan have recently tried to deny the Kono Statement of 1993.
South Korea wasn't alone in criticizing Tokyo for its past actions and current inaction. The North Korean and Chinese ambassadors to the UN said the Japanese government was trying to deny and hide its past wrongdoings. The U.S. ambassador to Japan, Carolyn Kennedy, on Thursday, called on Korea and Japan to improve relations and said the U.S. will do what it can to help. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Now here in Seoul, U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Sung Kim has urged Japan to acknowledge its sexual enslavement of women in the early 20th century, calling it a grave human rights violation. Ambassador Kim has also asked Tokyo to refrain from any more what he called provocative actions. Our Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Sung Kim says he understands why South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se took the so-called comfort women issue to the United Nations.
Comfort women issue, the sex slaves issue, is a grave human rights violation. We understand the pain that's felt by these surviving women from that awful experience.
Ambassador Kim urged the Japanese government to work towards reducing the pain and suffering of those forced into sexual slavery by its military in the early 20th century. He said the statement issued by the U.S. Embassy in Japan following Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to the controversial Yasukuni War Shrine late last year was a hard-hitting warning. The shrine honors 14 Class A war criminals, so visits by high-ranking Japanese officials anger Japan's neighboring countries.
And I think as we've made clear, very clear, we would like Japan to address concerns of its neighbors, and that includes refraining from actions that are seen as provocative.
Ambassador Kim called on the two neighbors to work together on mending ties, as trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan is critical for regional security. This view was echoed by Tom Donilon, a former White House National Security Advisor, on Thursday. At a seminar in Washington, Donilon expressed the hope that the leaders of the two countries meet for talks on the sidelines of the upcoming nuclear security summit this month. But as long as Prime Minister Shinzo Abe sticks with his nationalistic stance, summit talks with his South Korean counterpart don't seem likely. President Park Geun-hye has refused to sit down with the Japanese leader since taking office, saying the country must first embrace truth and reconciliation. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
On a day of fast-moving developments in Ukraine, Western nations are condemning Crimea's move to vote on reuniting the autonomous region with Russia. Well, U.S. President Barack Obama spoke directly with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin and urged a diplomatic resolution to the conflict there. ARIRANG News Kwon So-ah has this report.
Crimea was, is, and will be an integral part of Ukraine.
That was the statement by Ukraine's interim prime minister on Thursday in response to the Crimean parliament's vote to bring forward a referendum on March 16th to reunite the autonomous republic with Russia. The US and EU stood with the Ukrainian government in condemning the move, saying the referendum violates the Ukrainian constitution as well as international law. The EU at a meeting in Brussels urged Russia to de-escalate the situation.
Any further steps by the Russian Federation to destabilize the situation in Ukraine would lead to severe and far-reaching consequences for relations between the European Union and its member states on the one hand and the Russian Federation on the other hand, which will include a broad range of economic areas.
The EU talked of sanctions, including travel bans and asset freezes. A cancellation of an upcoming EU-Russia summit was also considered. However, not all EU members are in favor of the proposed sanctions, since they would come at a cost to them as well. The US has already imposed visa restrictions on Russian officials. President Barack Obama told his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin that Russia's violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity had prompted the US to take a number of punitive steps in response. The White House says that during an hour-long phone call Thursday, hours after the Crimean vote, Obama called on Putin to hold direct talks with the new government in Ukraine and urged him to find a diplomatic resolution to the situation. Officials and experts believe that the Ukrainian crisis is no longer one between divided groups within the country, but also a serious issue between the West and Russia. UK Prime Minister David Cameron compared the situation to World War II, saying the slightest miscalculation could see the situation spiral out of control. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
A longtime central and local government official has been tapped to head Korea's Ministry of Security and Public Administration. The presidential office of Cheongwade says Kang Byung-gyu, the former vice minister of Public Administration and Security during the Lee Myung-bak administration, was nominated to succeed former minister Yoo Jung-bok. Now, Yoo resigned earlier this week to run for the Incheon city mayoral post in the June local elections. The presidential office says Kang's knowledge and experience from decades-long public service was highly noted for his nomination. Kang's appointment will be made official after a parliamentary hearing. More than 150 government employees around the country have stepped down to run for an elected post at the upcoming June 4th local elections. The Public Administration Ministry says a total of 152 central and local government officials have tendered their resignations from last December until their deadline Thursday this week. Some notable names include former Minister of Security and Public Administration Yoo Jung-bok running for Incheon City Mayor, and ex-Vice Minister of the same ministry Park Chan-woo, who will run for Cheonan City Mayor. Now it's time for our movie review of the week, and Hollywood's long campaign towards Oscars concluded on Sunday night with the broadcast of the 86th Academy Awards. Critics had been pointing out that this year's race was one of the strongest in recent memory, and viewers seem to agree, giving the annual telecast its largest audience in a decade. While popcorn blockbusters such as the science fiction Gravity and issue-based films dealing with slavery and AIDS all triumphed during the lively evening hosted by daytime TV host Ellen DeGeneres. Well, here to share his thoughts on the winners and enduring popularity of the Oscars is, of course, our film critic, Piers Conran. Good afternoon to you, Piers.
Good afternoon to you.
So, did you enjoy this year's Oscars show?
Truth be told, I did not tune in this year. Actually, most years I don't watch because it's, I guess it's an odd time schedule. But of course, once it did happen, my social media feed was just inundated with all the awards, the winners themselves, and plenty of pundits giving in their opinions about the show this year.
Well, so Piers, were this year's Oscars any different than other years? I mean, what differentiated this year from the previous years?
Well, I mean, that is a worthwhile question. There was a big audience this year, the biggest in 10 years. The Oscars had been kind of declining for a while. I guess it's just the films were kind of popular. It's not as if they made more money, and the average amount of money earned by the Oscar films was kind of on par with other years. But still, they seem to kind of grasp the public consciousness in a bigger way this year, particularly things like Gravity, which was incredibly popular, or films like The Wolf of Wall Street and American Hustle, which were not just critically praised, but also widely enjoyed by the public.
No, you know, who were the big winners of the night? I mean, we know Gravity won lots of awards.
It did. Gravity was the big winner in terms of the amount of Oscars it got. It got 7 this year, wow. Which is quite a lot. Of course, the major one it won was for Best Director for Alfonso Cuarón, and everyone expected that. He's won pretty much everything on the campaign trail, be it Golden Globes and BAFTAs and the Directors Guild of America. And he really did. He really deserved that. No one was ever going to take that away from him. The other awards were mostly technical. I'm not quite sure everything it got. I mean, visual effects certainly, sound editing, things like that. It was a real spectacle, and it was rewarded for being that kind of a film. But the big winner of the night, in terms of best film, of course, was 12 Years a Slave, which was not a huge surprise, but was less certain than Best Director for Gravity. So, and then for the acting awards, it was certainly Dallas Buyers Club, which got Matthew McConaughey got his first Oscar. Hard to believe. We say that 5 years ago, we never would have imagined that. And then Jared Leto got Best Supporting Actor for the same film.
Now, so Piers, how did the winners match up with your predictions? For instance, 12 Years a Slave, would you say that deserved the every ounce of that Oscars for its best picture?
I definitely don't begrudge it its win. I think it's a great film. Honestly, in terms of my predictions, I think pretty much everything matched up. It's not as if I'm an incredible prognosticator. I think pretty much everyone that predicted the Oscars got pretty much everything right this year. There were not a huge amount of surprises, despite how close the race did seem. It seemed like that the campaign gets so long these days that these things are kind of almost called ahead of time. Yeah, so there were lots of great films. 12 Years a Slave, a very worthy winner, wonderful film. Some people will say that there was kind of a white guilt thing going on, but really it's a very artistic production, and I'm glad that it won. But any of those 10 films would have been a worthy winner this year.
Now, what about those that didn't get as much spotlight? I mean, which films would you have liked to see win some Oscars?
Well, I was a good fan of Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street, which was nominated in many categories but didn't win. I wasn't expecting it to win anything this year. Scorsese's films have done well in the past, and Leonardo DiCaprio, poor guys, had 5 nominations for Best Actor or Supporting Actor, has yet to win one. Again, this wasn't his year. In fact, Vanity Fair wrote an interesting piece about why he can't win, because he's too cool. There's an interesting theory about why he'll have to get older and a little less cool and he'll finally get his award. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but it was an interesting opinion. But one film I really, really liked was Act of Killing, which is a documentary that didn't win the documentary prize. But the fact that it was nominated was wonderful, because it's a very strange and shocking film that I'm glad it got that far, but not quite as far as I would have liked it to. But that's how it goes.
Now, do you think the Academy Awards, I mean, it gets a lot of, media coverage, and it's really, a lot of fans keep their eyes closely on tabs with this Academy Awards. Do you think Academy Awards are an important institution?
Absolutely. Many people will criticize the Oscars, but they criticize the Oscars so vociferously and they're so loud about it that obviously it has a huge impact on them as well. Everyone cares about the Oscars. I've been watching the Oscars for years, or at least have just been following them for years, and people that are even just watch a few films a year still are aware of the Oscars when they happen. But essentially, what I think is interesting is that Hollywood is very clever. There's all this kind of talk about people who are fighting to kind of win an award, and there's all these kind of tussles with their marketing campaigns. But at the end of the day, the Oscars are just a huge show. Not just the awards that happen on Sunday night every March, but just the whole lead up to it is one enormous show that's just capped off by that one broadcast. It doesn't matter which films win. The controversies don't really matter, but it's just really popular. Essentially, it's like a massive PR stunt for Hollywood.
Right. I mean, I can just think off the top of my head, the red carpet, who wore what kind of dresses, who wore who, and those kind of things always makes headlines and entertainment news days following the Oscars. Now, could we say that the awards are changing with time?
I think the main change we're seeing these days is a stronger grasp of social media and the internet in general. I did not watch the Oscars. I didn't see any news on television. I didn't read a newspaper. But online, I found out everything about it through my Twitter and Facebook feeds. And so they're kind of grasping that. Perhaps the single biggest thing that happened at the Oscars this year had nothing to do with any films. Host Ellen DeGeneres took a selfie with a dozen of A-listers during the broadcast, and that it broke down Twitter because it was retweeted 3 million times.
Right.
And everyone, there's a Simpsons version of it. There's all these silly things, and so they understand what the public wants, and so they're moving in that direction. Whether they'll change from an old white male-dominated thing, that remains to be seen. But they are and will remain an important institution in film.
Well, definitely, and keeping up with the up-and-coming trends and with the social media and everything. All right, Piers Conran, always a pleasure to have you here in the studio every week, and we look forward to next Friday.
Me too. Thanks for having me again.
Happy Friday, everyone. Today we have another cold day along with a dry weather warning still in effect for most parts of the nation. But today is the peak of this cold snap, so hang in there because tomorrow we can get our warm weather back. Now, for more details, let's move over to our satellite map. Due to the influence of high pressure front, we can expect to see some clear skies nationwide, and the air quality seems to be good without any fine dust in the atmosphere. Now going over to our readings, Seoul will top out at 6 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will get up to 8 and 9 degrees respectively. Now moving on to other regions, on Jeju it's very windy at 8. Dokdo will get up to 1 while Mankumgang drops down to -1. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park and back to you, Ganyang.
All right, thank you, Michelle, for that. And that is all from me at this hour. Thank you for watching. I'll see you back here with Business Today at 4 p.m. Korea time.